She's not just solving workplace puzzles, she's guiding leaders to the answers with heart and strategy. With over 20 years in human resources, Debbie Stein brings a people first mindset to every room she enters. From building inclusive cultures to mentoring the next generation, she leads with clarity and courage. Today on the Cultivate Experience, we unpack first impressions, courageous conversations, and why great leadership is about guiding, not giving the answers. Welcome, relational leaders and listeners. This is Cultivate, your podcast destination where we celebrate thriving relational leaders and encourage each other along the influence journey. I am Wendy F. Adams, your host and strategic guide. I believe work shouldn't be a four-letter word, but should inspire, challenge, and fulfill. Through a high challenge and high support model, we will explore the recipe for relational leadership that drives meaningful change. After all, as leaders, we're either driving progress or we're driving the problem. So let's grow together. Welcome back to a fresh episode of Cultivate. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming a courageous leader, energized by people and powered with purpose. Debbie Stein, HR Director with Olen Properties. Debbie, so pumped to have you join us for the Cultivate Experience.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here and talking with you again, Wendy. It's a pleasure.
The audience is going to be just riveted because I know that even in our green room conversation and now coming back together, there's just that space of you are bold, but in such an authentic way, that combination. So we're going to jump in and I want the audience to hear from you, Debbie, right away. We know every leader has a why. You've spent over 2 decades helping people, what I say, decode the puzzle of workplace. When did you first realize that HR was the field where you could make that the biggest impact?
Well, that's a great question. And, I can't believe it's already been over 2 decades, 25 years of HR, but I'm an employee myself, and having not always been treated so optimally as an employee, I thought, this is something I want to do. And I kind of segued into HR entry level, helping out with onboarding because I really enjoy public speaking. And I found that I could really make a difference and affect change with people. I was listening, hearing stories, and really engaging with the employees and able to change their experience from not optimal, which, I had gotten, to more optimal, and being able to lead that for my team. And I think it really makes a huge difference overall. And that's my why. That's what gets me out of bed every day, is that I'm going to go in and I'm going to make a difference for someone, even if it's just, a micro difference. It's a difference.
I love it. I love that you're saying, look, incremental, but we're moving. We're moving forward. And if it is just for the one, also what a journey to be on, because we know we learn what to do and also what not to do, right?
Yeah.
They're all learning experiences and things that we take along with us. And so I love that you're saying, hey, that's what speaks into my why. That's what energizes me, is to be able to be the difference. We say it and you're walking that out. I really appreciate that. We here at the Cultivate Experience believe wholeheartedly relational leadership is grounded in that place of self-awareness and authenticity.
Yeah.
How have your volunteer leadership experiences shaped how you lead within the workplace in those places where you're giving of your time?
Oh, wow. That's another great question. You've got some great questions. You should do this for a living. It's interesting because in the workplace, in human resources, I don't always have direct authority over people. So I have to manage a lot via influence. Mm-hmm. And I carried that over into my nonprofit, into my volunteer work, is just leading by example, managing via influence, just always with professionalism and courtesy and directness, because they say HR has a lot of gray areas and leadership has a lot of gray areas, and it does. But what I've found is that if you treat people with professionalism, with courtesy and respect, whether it's earned or not earned, honestly, that they'll react to that and that other people see it too, right? So taking that back to your question into the volunteer world is, I took a lot of that managing via influence. I think it really escalated my skills there. where I don't even have any authority, whereas in the workplace I have some, but in the volunteer space there's none. And so it's all given to me by the volunteers. So treating them with professionalism, with courtesy, with respect, and getting on board with them and being willing to do the hard work, just like I'm asking them to do, and translating that back to the workplace. And I think I've become a better HR person because of it, because I rely less on the authority as an HR person and more just on my communication and relational skills as a person.
I love it. And I love that you brought it back to that's what grounds you, right? Like that's the grounding
Yeah.
factor, and taking away the title, or like you said, even what power or authority. You defined leadership exactly what it is. It's influence. And whether you're in that volunteer space or it comes with the title in the workplace, how do you influence? And again, going back to that's how you show up and recognizing, who's Debbie, and who's showing up today, and what's your responsibility in that, as far as you're interacting and working with others. I think that that's fantastic. And some of those things are when we can go back to those grounding foundational places. That's what resets us, especially
Yeah.
when we're in those tumultuous times. I so appreciate that. You've mentioned it, and I've had, some time to talk to you. And so I want to hear from you, and the audience get to interact. Advocacy, people first strategies, right? I've heard you say it. It's already come across in even talking about your volunteer work. What does people first really look like at the decision making table, so that you can ensure that it's much more than just a buzzword or a catchphrase?
Yeah, well, human resources is balancing the line of company risk and employee advocacy. But people first to me really means that when we hear about someone who's got a performance issue, or, a manager comes to me and says, oh, so and so is not performing, we might need to let them go. I'm like, have you talked to
Mm,
them? So my
mm.
first question is always, let's have a conversation, see what's going on. Let them tell their story. Let's not make a decision in a vacuum. Let's get all the information we can to make a proper decision on what needs to be, because maybe someone does need to be taken out of a position. Maybe they need to put in one of less responsibility, or maybe they're just bored and they need more responsibility. You never know, or they've got something going on at home. So
Yes.
putting people first and making sure we get their stories before we take action, I think is super critical. And something I really try hard to practice, and I recommend on my managers all the time. My first question is, have you talked to them? Have you talked to them? Have you found out what's going on in their lives? Have you found out what's going on in the workplace that might be affecting them? Because if they were doing fine before and there's something happening now, there was some pivotal epiphany that happened or change, and we need to know what that is, because it could affect others going forward.
And you hit it right there at the, I mean, so rich. It will affect others, right? What we bring to the table inevitably is going to affect the team, and that outpouring is going to affect outcomes, right? So it is in our best interest as leaders to take that opportunity to pause, be curious, which again, not intentional for many of us. That's not a default. We have to be intentional in that space to be curious, knowing, and I said this up front, to ask those hard, go into those courageous conversations and brave spaces.
Yeah.
You're right. We've seen a change. Let's take the guesswork out and just ask
Right.
what's
Just ask.
happening, right? Right. So
Yeah.
I love that. Again, and you're not saying, I'm not hearing, this is not necessarily easy, but it is simple. What we're like, we don't have to complicate. Let's ask, and let them know you've been seen, you've been heard, and that will then give an opportunity. You mentioned it. It may mean that a pivot needs to be made, a course correction, a different position, even to the fact of there may be a self-select for that person to say, this isn't the right space for me
Right.
anymore. But let's walk all the way through those steps before we just go, throw up our hands.
Right. Well, it's really interesting. I've had managers say, oh, well, I don't want to, ask about their personal business. It's like, well,
Yeah.
they can share as much as they want to. You ask the question, like, what's going on? And they can share as much as they want to. But if you don't ask, you're never going to find out. And then again, we're back to making a decision in a vacuum, which I do not advocate for. So.
Well, I have to say, you are, and maybe I'm just not hearing it as much. Usually you do hear from HR, be careful, right? We go back to that risk space. Don't ask, we can't go in those spaces. We have to make sure that we keep these. And yes, healthy boundaries, but you just gave permission to really be in that human space,
Yeah,
right? The full human is showing up. The days of check it at the door, I really hope are not a thing. Like we can pull that
yeah,
off because professionalism doesn't mean you're a robot. You
right,
still are the human who had all the life that was going on outside of the space. That human is still walking through the door. How can we help in that integration
right,
of real life? And I think you painted that, you told that story really, really well, which has to speak into how you guide so many employees towards answers, solutions, rather than just these quick fixes, right? Now we don't want to put a
right,
band-aid on it. And I
right.
think that's a space I want us to kind of tackle and walk in through next. How do you help others build confidence and clarity in their problem solving? So like in from speaking to managers who are coming to you, go, I don't know what to do. He or she just won't. What does that look like in those conversations?
Well, you can't help everybody. I want to preface that.
Mm,
Not
mm,
everybody is comfortable being a manager or a leader, and whether they should or should not be on that role is not my decision to make. Right. But when they come to me with problems and I work to coach them through it, my first question is always, well, have you talked to the person? Let's just use an attendance problem. Linda cannot make it in on time. Right. She was doing great. She's not making it on time. I don't know what to do with her. It's like, okay, well, have you talked to her? Yes, I've talked to her. Nothing going on. Okay, great. Well, have you set a standard? Have you said, Linda, I need you to be on time every day or these consequences are going to occur? Well, no, but she knows she needs to be on time. I'm like, well, see, she may know it, but until you say it, right, it doesn't really take effect. So, well, but it was in her job description when she was hired. I'm like, when she was hired, 10 years ago. I mean, so just coaching them through those, setting performance standards, coaching them to develop some follow up, right? It needs to be
mm.
marked and sustained improvement. It needs to be followed up on a specific timeline. And if it's not being met, then what are you going to do with the next step? And are you prepared to take action on this person, right? Because if you're not, then it's a moot point.
And why are
There's
we
no
even
point in
having
even
this
going to
conversation?
be. So I have all those conversations with the leaders, and it's really eye opening to them sometimes, like, oh, I didn't think about that. And, it's like, well, that's why you have me.
Well, and what you just said is you just spoke out the partnership
Right,
between human resources
right,
and management. And there's management and then there's your executive leadership. Like it has to be across all of those lines. And I
right,
love that you said there's that consistency factor. Okay, we're going to speak it out, then we're going to talk about what does it look like if we don't
right,
walk that, the culture that we are building, but
right.
not to just make assumptions that everybody hears it the same way and is going to hold on to it and walk it out in the same way.
Yep,
But what does it look like when we don't? I do appreciate that you started with it's not for everyone. I can't help everyone,
right,
but the bottom line is you are here to openly say, I'm here to partner with you.
right,
If you would like to partner with me.
right, right. And make sure that it's applied consistently across the organization, whatever the organization may be, right?
Yeah, yeah. As we kind of turn a corner here a little bit, I want to step into something that we do hear quite a bit about, and it can rub the wrong way, and that's that inclusive word, right? And we want to talk about building an inclusive culture. Across different organizations, you've been able to do that, where that looks different in each
Yeah.
space. What have you found to be the most effective way to turn inclusion, as buzzword, from a policy into actually a daily practice that everyone takes ownership of?
Well, by making sure we're compliant with all state and federal laws, of course, the first thing, but by setting the example with my own behaviors. If
Mm,
someone wants to be called by a certain term or a certain pronoun, I use it. And
mm-hmm,
if I hear
mm-hmm,
someone not, I call them out on it, and I won't do it publicly unless I have
mm.
to. Sometimes you have to make sure the whole room knows what's happening, right? But
What's going on? Yeah.
I might pull someone aside privately and say, hey, this person wants to be called by this pronoun. This person wants to be called by this name. Is there some reason you're not doing that? Well, I just don't like it. I don't care whether you like it or not. This is the law. This is what we do. And if you can't adjust to that, then I need you to let me know because we're going to have a further conversation about it. So I guess when you talked initially about being courageous, I think that's one of my
Mm-hmm.
skill sets is I'm not afraid of confrontational conversations like that. And I use the word confrontational, but direct is also a better word, because we can't have that type of behavior. So setting the example, nipping it in the bud right away if we see it and hear it, and, just making sure we have, again, a professional and courteous workplace where everyone can just come to work and do their job without feeling like they're under the gun or they're being harassed in some way.
Yeah, I appreciate that you started with setting the example, that you have to walk it out. You have your own thoughts, feelings, and the way that you might, and this is what we have to do,
Right.
and how you're going to walk it out. And also, yes, because I can be in that camp as well. Wow, Wendy, you're really direct. And it really can come down to tone. Don't get me wrong. I've got to check my tone, right? But the bottom line is we want it to be clear. So sometimes people come back with and say, man, that was really stern or really direct, but were we clear? So I can work on tone, but it doesn't change the message.
Right.
This is what we need to do. And so I do appreciate when we talk about those courageous conversations, it really is that space of I have a title called The Elephant Slayer. The elephant doesn't leave the room and it doesn't get any smaller. We've got to be able to address, right? And so that's where we are. And I think you said it really well early on in our conversation, setting that expectation up front. This is who we are as an organization. This is how we walk out. There's going to be conflict. I mean, do you have humans in your space? This is what happens at times. So appreciate that so much.
I want to add on to that a little bit more is as I've, looked for various positions throughout my career, I've selected organizations that are strong in that inclusivity to begin with, where I don't get a vibe that that's going to be something I'm going to be handling every day. So it's very important to me when I was looking for an organization that not be an issue, that as long as I can come in and set the example, that everybody else would be fine, and leadership was behind me. So that was super important. So there's organizations out there that are not. So
that's it. And you need to know that. I'm interested to hear you, and you mentioned leadership, right? This is where strategy comes into play, and you've earned your seat. I can tell. We've talked about it a little bit, and we're going to flesh this out a little more at the strategic table with your executive leadership.
Right.
How do you balance your advocacy for the employee well-being with those real pressures of business and performance and making those next level steps?
So that's probably the hardest balancing act of all. Is the business interests don't always align with what's best for the employee. And sometimes I have to suck it up, and just say, okay, we're, the business is going to make this offer. We're going to do this, go down this path. But at the same time, being able to sit at the table, which was also very important for me when looking for a new position, that I had a seat at the table, I can really affect some good change there. And I can really advocate for the employees at that table way more than I could in a non-strategic role. So even though I don't win all the battles, I feel like overall I win the war, if that makes sense.
Well, it does make sense because what we're talking about being at that strategic table and that balancing act is there's collaboration that has to happen. And when we talk about true collaboration, it really isn't about you win or they win. It's about we win. And for that to happen, then there's going to be that give. And we talk about give and take, but and sometimes what we're talking about is it's just not right now. So now you get to speak that back out to the employee. We can't do that now, but you've been heard, and we're going to see how we can incorporate that in as we continue to develop our strategic planning, but your voice has been heard. And I think that, like you said, you not being at the strategic table, then that conversation never happens.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that you were like, as I looked for, you looked for your next step, it was important that you knew you would have a seat there because it would be needed. I think that when we think about that balancing act, there are those of us who are in those positions at the table and what I like to say, directly speaking into front line, that's where we can start to feel, the heaviest burden and that place of burnout. And you did a wonderful job there. And I just want us to really kind of sit in that of it's not about having all of the answers, but it is about being in a place where we can speak into those questions and to have our voice be heard as to these are things we still need to address.
Right.
So,
Right. And making sure when I talk to the employee too, and if I have to give them not so great news,
mm,
explaining the how and the why, and making sure I'm understanding that myself, that I'm not just, doing the action of someone's direction, although that's certainly, I follow leadership direction, but that I understand the hows and the whys, and that I can answer the questions to the employee and handle it as empathetically and respectfully as possible, so that they're not left feeling, like they're just a tick mark, on my task list.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that because we know in the work that you're in, and you've already mentioned it, look, there are laws. And you are there to make sure that the organization stays in line with those things, right? To make sure that they are not out there in this risky space and following regulations. So you're that reliance expert who has to also be a people leader. And I think that what I'm hearing is that what we keep coming back to is you being in an authentic space. And that's what you're calling other leaders into is, hey, make sure, like you said, that it's not just you're just spouting rhetoric, but even to say, I struggled with this, or, I was challenged in and I had to dig in deep to be able to come to the place of an understanding of why we are here today, what we're working to. How does this speak into to everyone who's a part of and not a widget? How do you approach the first impression space? I know we can talk about what it looks like from somebody, putting in an application to sitting in that seat in the panel, and they're coming in nervous for that. That's their first impression of the organization in a workplace. How can leaders use those first impression moments to set the tone of trust and clarity that we're talking about is so important? How do you do that right up front?
Well, another good question, Wendy. Another good question. Let's see. So, well, I'm always frank and direct and upfront. And if I can't answer a question, which I frequently can't actually in human resources, because I have a lot of confidential information, I'll just say, I'm not at liberty to answer that.
Yes.
Here's what I can tell you. And just, people can tell when you're being deceptive. People can tell when
Mm,
you're being manipulative for the most part. And so
yeah.
I work very hard not to be that way, and just be upfront about what I can and cannot share. And, here's my name. Here's what we're going to do. Even in an interview, it's like, okay, thank you for coming in for the interview. Here's the process. Do you have any questions about that? No. Okay. Let's
Yes.
dive in, and at the end of the interview, shake their hand. Thank you for coming. You'll hear from me by, in the next 48 hours, in the next 72 hours, whatever I need to get, or the hiring manager is on vacation. He'll be back in a week. Well, you'll hear from me by that. So just being really transparent and out front with information, and establishing my credibility right from the get-go is super important, I think. And I think other managers can do the same thing. They just need to provide the how and the why, the communication, right? The details that they would want if they were in that spot.
Mm.
And nothing builds credibility faster, and just be honest about it. And if you can't say something, just say, well, I can't really tell you that. I wish I could, but, then we both have a problem. So, and I think
Yeah,
that's how I do it.
I think when you said it so well, like set that expectation up front.
Yeah.
This is what you can expect from me. And now they're hearing from Debbie, who's representing the organization that they're considering and hopefully are interviewing as much as they're being interviewed. But boy, did you speak that out. 48 hours, 72 hours. Hey, someone's on vacation. Because the worst thing is okay, I've had the interview and you're waiting and you're waiting and you're right. What does
Worst.
that say? Oh my gosh. You've now filled in all the blanks. And so you said it. We can do that.
Yeah.
Leaders can make those commitments and keep to those commitments. And it does set that tone because let's face it, we want trust from that individual and we want them to be clear with us. So we've got to be able to emulate that. And it starts right there at the beginning. So that's, employee and looking at that on the front end. We've talked about this in your leadership space. You've been doing this for a little bit of time now, right? So there's that space of what you want to leave behind. I think that's important for all of us to look at, whether that's 15 years from now, 5 years from now, but the legacy and that next generation space. Man, let's face it, 5 generations in the workplace at the same time. I don't think that's ever happened before. So in human resources, you have the opportunity to mentor what I like to call emerging leaders, right? They're coming up, they're figuring themselves out. What's that one lesson that you know that you want to pass on that you wish someone had told you really early in your career?
Oh, well, what I tell my mentees, so I mentor, graduating HR professionals from the Cal State University system. And what I tell them is just always be honest and be direct. Like if you don't know the answer to a question, ask. If you can't say something, just tell them I can't, I'm not able to disclose that. Just always be frank and honest and forthright, and that'll get you everywhere. Don't try to play games. Don't try to hide things. Um, just answer as forthrightly as you can, as you are able to in the role you're in, and you'll be in good shape. Ask questions if you don't know, because if you don't know, as an experienced professional, I know you don't know. I can see it on your face. So if you don't then ask me a question, then I've already written you off.
And the worst thing you can do is to make something up. Don't do that,
Worst.
right?
That's the worst, right?
But I love that you said, "Hey, you're not fooling anyone." Like we know. So ask those questions. And that's how you've walked through your career, right? And again, we all are maturing through the space, so you realize how things we still need to work on. Because what I've heard from you throughout our time already today and previous was you don't have all the answers. You haven't arrived. You're still in a place in a space where someone's mentoring you, right? And speaking
Absolutely.
into those spaces. So I think that continuing to emulate is so important. And couldn't agree with you more. One of the places for me that had been a challenge, and I'm still very intentional in it, but now I embrace it, is in that emerging leader space and being able to work. And part of it was I needed a vocabulary check. I'm saying one thing and they're saying something completely different, or I'm hearing, right? And so we had to reset and okay, let me understand, going back to let's be curious. Let's be curious in that space. So I really, really appreciate that. We're turning the corner here on wrapping things up. I can't believe, because we could just keep this going.
Wow.
But I know. But I want to make sure that we don't miss this space, because I know that depending on where our audience is in their leadership journey, what's one practice that if you're throwing it out there to everyone that you want to challenge every executive listening to commit to this year?
Being willing to make decisions to take the lead. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever been in a meeting or in a room and it's like, okay, everybody has all these great ideas. And it's like, okay, well, who wants to lead this? And it's just crickets, right?
See the top of heads.
For leaders, especially emerging leaders, not being afraid to take the lead. Say, you know what, I'll go ahead and lead this and I'll be accountable, for the results with my team. Because a lot of times people don't want to be accountable for the results because they're not sure how it's going to run out. But you're never going to lead and you're never going to learn if you don't sometimes fail. And if you don't start leading, you'll never get leading. Does that make sense? So
it does.
That's what I would challenge leaders to do, is be more accountable themselves and be willing to step up and take the lead.
I love it. And you started where we're going to end, which is all the way back around to that self-awareness space, right? Yeah. And you said it, you can't get to where you want to get if you don't start.
Right.
And gosh, we know that it does not mean that there will not be the stumbles. I mean, that we learn through those. You pointed that out. Leaders that you've learned what to do, what not to do. And so we're all in that education space as we walk through it, but someone's got to raise their hand and say, yeah, let's do this. I'm going to walk it out. And again, not alone. We're not talking silos, right? But someone has got to move us forward. I love that. I think that's a challenge that no matter where we are in our relational leadership journey, that's something that we can commit to this year, is when it's put in front of us, walking it out. Debbie, it has been fantastic to dig in deeper. I learned more. I know that the audience is going to take away. Nothing that we talked about today stays here. You've given us so much to chew on and to be courageous about, right? Let's be bold in the spaces that we have been asked to lead in. I love when we finish things up and before we wrap things up to get a little deeper, fun look into the person on the other side of the screen from me. And that's just with a couple quick fun questions.
Sure.
Favorite live concert that you've ever attended, if that's in your space?
Oh, favorite, Meatloaf.
Wow. Okay. That had to be a good time.
That was a good tour. He's an entertainer for sure.
He is. Okay. So outside of a tough work day, how do you want to decompress? What's that go-to activity?
I sing in the car on the way home. So I have my playlist and I'll just sing songs that I know the words to, and I just blast it and relax on the way home. By the time I get home, I'm, already have released any stress I had from the day.
Love it. And you've entertained people on the road because they're like, she's having a blast.
I definitely see people looking because I'm in the car playing air guitar,
I love it. And then one of my favorites, favorite ice cream flavor or sweet treat?
Pistachio nut ice cream.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That is not one that I have heard recently. So, and we're in that season now. Yeah, it's good. That is excellent. Well, like I said, you have really taken us to school today and had us really be inspired, shifted our thinking about leadership. And again, nothing that we're going to just sticks with us here, but we take on. Thank you for sharing your story, providing just a glimpse into your leadership journey and push us into moving forward with ours. Your insights have been quite intentional and very impactful.
It's been a pleasure. And I hope if I motivate one leader to step up or, change the way they do things, then I've done my job here. And it's been great talking with you, Wendy, as always. So.
Well, I appreciate it. That's been the encouragement, and I look forward to more conversations in the future. Well, Cultivate collaborators, you know that that's a wrap today. But remember, each of us brings our own special flavor to the mix of relational leadership. So let's continue. Until next time, keep stirring things up, making an impact, and being better together. Thanks, everyone. Before we sign off today, I want to send out huge appreciation to our listeners for tuning in. I hope you felt seen, heard, and inspired to level up your own leadership journey. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And if you're ready to level up your leadership, connect with me at cultivateforgood.com. That's cultivateforgood.com.